Mark, if I can start with you, this is the seventh year of the Run in the Dark, is it?
That's right, yeah.
And are you surprised at how big it has become in that time?
Yeah, it's been really interesting because in the aftermath of my accident, I set up a trust, and originally the trust is a trust structure is set up to fund capital and ongoing costs of spinal injury, because 7 out of 10 people never work again, 4 out of 10 live below the poverty line. So you just the likelihood of making a life for yourself, a working life, is limited. So we figured once I got back to my speaking and got back in action, in fact, maybe we could do something more. And we set up Run in the Dark to try and fund the long-term problem of finding a cure for paralysis. So we started small. We thought it would be 4 provinces. We thought we'd have one in Dublin, Cork, Galway and Belfast, sort of 4 provinces thing. But then over time, well, in fact, in that first year, back in 2011, one man and his dog in Sydney and Singapore and New York started to say, well, we can't get back, but we want to do one here. And that's grown now to 50 cities, 25,000 people right around the world. So it's been a big surprise, but I suppose people are starting to engage in the idea that there is no cure, but if we get together, if we get involved, maybe we can change that narrative.
It's amazing the kind of the mushroom effect, isn't it? Like you say, one man and his dog in one place, and it just spreads and spreads and spreads then.
Yeah, I think we've had people on the ground, volunteers here in Cork, who knew nothing about organising running events, but in that wave of emotion that comes after a spinal cord injury, people got involved, and then that's grown, and we try to make the event as good now as we have learned to become run organisers. We've tried to make it a good quality product, that people have timing chips. The course is organised in the city centre here in Cork at night on a Wednesday night. It's an unusual event to be able to run at night on the city streets, and it's a quality product, quality event, but we use the margin that we make from it to plough back into the research. So it's loads of support along the way, and then of course other like-minded people emerge, like Jamie Wall over the years, and people's families and others in Dublin, right around the world, get involved, who are on a similar track and have a similar ambition to uncover a cure for paralysis.
And that's the focus, isn't it? Or that's what the focus has become, a kind of a worldwide pooling of resources, that you just have everybody kind of giving their bit, and when you add it all together, it gives you the best chance of like you say, coming up with a cure.
Well, you see, the easy storyline around this is that some guy who's really determined suddenly will find a cure, the sort of the hero narrative. And of course, as so many of us know, just because you want to be fixed, just because you want to be cured, doesn't mean that you're going to be cured. Just because you want to win a gold medal or a championship doesn't mean that it's going to happen. And in fact, what we need is ambitious individuals working together to ultimately find a cure. And what we've found right around the world is that there's no individual scientist who is cracking the problem of finding a cure, but there are loads of individuals and science labs and technology companies who are doing brilliant things. And by bringing those people together, by finding and connecting those people, we believe that we will fast track a cure for paralysis. And in this world, fast tracking probably means 10 to 20 years rather than 6 months.
And Jamie, if I can turn to you, if you give us an outline of how you came into contact with Mark since your own experience.
Well, I suppose it was I was injured on the 28th of June 2014, so I was in Beaumont Hospital at the time, and a friend of mine, Sarah O'Donovan from Cork, would have been she'd have just been living in Dublin and came in to visit, and at the time she wasn't working with Mark, but I think within about 2 weeks of my injury, a recruitment agency spoke to her and said, oh look, there's an opening here with the Mark Pollock Trust. And look, to be honest, like up until that point I had never heard of Mark or of the trust or of any of it, like, and she said it to me, and the two of us were kind of looking it up, and we were kind of just laughing when she came to visit. We were laughing, just saying, Jesus, like, what to talk about timing, like, 2 weeks after this happens, all of a sudden a friend of yours is going to interview for a job with Mark, and you're kind of saying, right, look, this isn't exactly the best circumstance in the world, but at least straight away you've kind of got, you've got not an eye to a route to a perfect kind of answer like Mark has said, but you're looking at something straight away and saying, okay, you've got that kind of almost, a silver lining's the wrong word, but kind of, you're looking at something saying, okay, there's another person who's not happy with this lot and who's actually doing something about it. There's something straight away to kind of latch onto and say, okay, what can I do to give a hand in that direction? I'm not going to be the one who sets, the kind of, I've used this metaphor before about the big wheel, like, and it's kind of ironic, all things considered, but once a big wheel is going, all you want everyone to do is kind of give it a little tip to keep it kind of moving, like, and in my opinion, that's what kind of this whole thing has, if maybe I'm wrong now, Mark, but 7 years ago you started to give the big wheel or the big rock a push, and now it's a case of the likes of me and anyone else who is interested in the way you're going about it, in just giving it the tips that we can give it, and whatever small tip we can to keep it rolling and keep it moving in the right direction. That's kind of where I've kind of been with it.
And Mark and Jamie, you're both very driven individuals, and before and after your accidents you've been high achievers. Is that something that's intrinsic, or is it something you almost have to coach yourself to do? We'll say now, after your accident, did you have to say, I'm not going to sit here feeling sorry for myself, I'm going to get up and do something? Or did it just come naturally to want to do the best you could to improve your situation?
I don't know. Well, I'd say we both have pretty strong views. I remember sitting and having this conversation in the National Rehab Hospital with you, Jamie, and I think both of us have been sports people, and you learn to win and lose, and you learn to look at your lot, look at the facts, acknowledge. I think you use a different phrase from me, but to accept the starting point as a starting point, and then what I've started to think is that we need to accept and understand that life in a wheelchair is very much worth living, and there are loads of people out there who have no interest in the cure side of things. So accepting the wheelchair as an enabler to living a meaningful life, work, relationships, and doing all the things that we as a community can do, whilst being enabled by our wheelchairs. That's the accepting of the starting point. The robotic legs, the aggressive physical therapy, the electrical stimulation, the biological interventions, that for me is on the hope side of the equation. And what I try to do is balance the acceptance and hope and run those things in parallel. But as I'm sure, well, I don't know whether you'll admit it, Jamie, but in my case, there are a hell of a lot of tears over the years. There are a hell of a lot of times sitting there feeling sorry for myself, still are today. But when you got something to go for, then it seems to melt away when you squeeze out those tough times by moving forward. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not gonna. I'm certainly not gonna argue with it anyway. No, like for me, like you said, that I have a slightly different word. Like, and for me, like I kind of try to use the word acknowledge, but like even just the way you phrased accept there, I think, from early on, I maybe took, and obviously look, there's a small bit of kind of anger and denial and all this that goes with that, and from early on I kind of took umbrage with the word accept, but I think I was more taking umbrage with the way it was being used than with the actual word itself. When you put it like that, accept it as a starting point, and also accept that, there are plenty of people who have a perfectly legitimate viewpoint that, they're happy enough with their lot, and they're happy enough that they see I can get on with this. And I think it's important, and it's something that I've had to work on and get better at as time has gone on. And I think I have, like, is that accepting that this is just your thinking on it, Jamie, like, and someone else's thinking on it is no less valid than yours, but then by the same token that yours is no less valid than theirs. And I think if people move towards, and if we as well move towards that kind of saying, look, there's nothing, like, I kind of find there is, that, like you said, that word balance, like there's somewhere in the middle. Like, I mean, personally for me, when you start talking a lot of the cliches that get bandied about, kind of, for me personally, and again, and I'm certainly not trying to insult anyone who has is happy with their life and says I'm having a good life. I think absolutely fair play to you, like, but for me, when I hear things like there's nothing that someone in a wheelchair can't do, or that people in a wheelchair only see the things they can do, not the things they can't, for me, I just I have a very kind of no bullshit attitude to that. I kind of say, look, please just don't give me that. Yes, is, like Mark said, very much a life worth living. I'll tick the box on that 9 days out of 10. Yeah, lots you can do, absolutely. But for me, it's a case of, can you do all the things you could do? No. So it's that kind of trying to find that balance of saying, like you said, life worth living, absolutely, like, and it's just trying to find that balance in the middle to say, I think for a long time the commentary was very much, there was no nuance in the debate. Like, the commentary was very much, look, you're either happy with it or you're not happy with it. Like, but in reality, like, nobody's fully happy with their life, whether they're in a wheelchair, whether they're standing up, whether they're, whatever their story is. You have people who have other issues, who deal with depression every day for totally different reasons, all these things. So, like, it's just a case of, this is my thing, like, this is Mark's thing, this is my thing, that's the overriding kind of pervasive kind of negative influence in my life. That doesn't mean that it makes my life less or not less worth living or anything like that. This is my kind of cross to bear, as it were, and I think everyone, like you said, like I'm trying to say, everyone has these crosses to bear. Some people get sick and get illnesses, some people have some people have mental illnesses. These are all the things that kind of make life that small bit more difficult, like. And I think just because you're dealing with these things doesn't mean that it's kind of, it doesn't mean that you can't enjoy the stuff that's there to be enjoyed, but by the same token, doesn't mean that you can't try if you want, and if that's the way you want to go about it, doesn't mean that you can't try to make that situation better for yourself as well. If you're sick, you try to get medicine. If you're suffering from mental illness, hopefully you'll be able to see someone and try and work through those things. And for me, this is no different. This is just a problem that I'm not overly happy with. I can be happy with it and while dealing with it, but I would also like to work towards finding a way to make it better.
And do you find yourselves in kind of ambassadorial or kind of spokesman roles? You mentioned a lot of people who accept being in a wheelchair and live full lives, but do you get people contacting you saying, I've been struck down with paralysis and I'm finding this very difficult to take, and do you find yourself kind of doing what you can to help them? Has there been any of that?
I wouldn't so much anyway. I'd say probably maybe slightly different for you, Mark, but I wouldn't have experienced an awful lot of that. I mean, I suppose again, maybe just being that small bit younger and newer, and kind of I would have found an awful lot of guys and guys that are happy and that are moving on with their lives and are having getting married and all these things have been very good to me. And even when again, when we don't agree on on, like you said, on that kind of that viewpoint of life, they might think, look, I'm happy out and I'm working away, and if it happens, great, but I'm not overly pushed on it. They've still been very good to me and helped me an awful lot, with a lot of things. But I suppose for me, I'm probably still very much on the kind of the receiving end of the help and the advice and that kind of side of things.
Yeah, I think it's funny the ambassadorial piece, because I certainly have tried to use my voice to advocate for some of the things that we're trying to do with the science and the technology, and to make connections with people around the world and bring those experts back here to Ireland to try and create a centre to look at the at the research, and along the way, I suppose you have to be conscious that you necessarily, in telling your story, become a self-appointed voice, whether you're meaning to do that or not. So it's something you've got to be careful of, and as a result, I do get some people with family members in the National Rehab Hospital, or people emerging out of it, people who are interested in the cure side of it. And I'm certainly not a counsellor and not an expert in anything but my own life experience. And Jamie and I did have conversations when he was in hospital, but and other times it's maybe a family member who, maybe my fiance is more appropriate to talk to the family member rather than me, because it's not just the patient or the person who's paralyzed, but often it's the family member dealing with angry me and angry Jamie at the time. We're not necessarily that easy when you're in the angry phase, and the families struggle to deal with that. So yeah, I've had people contact me, but and I've spoken to lots and lots of people, but certainly no expert. Just talking from my experience.
And we saw actually in the film you had out 3 years ago, your fiancée Simone, that there was scenes where it was genuinely tough to watch. So obviously it was 100 times tougher to film. What was the overall reaction to the film? Like, did you find that there was an increased awareness to your own situation and the wider scenario?
Yeah, I think it's been interesting, because the film. Well, it's actually interesting in looking back at it from my own perspective, because you forget so much stuff that you've done over your life, but in watching the film, it's documented, and it's only one version of the story. But I suppose what the result of it was that we came in contact with lots of people in wheelchairs, lots of many more family members, and we had some of those conversations. But we also came in contact with scientists and people who work in the funding sector, and the conversations and the work that we've been doing since that film came out, which came out in, I suppose, maybe in late 2014. It was very much my story of going to America, working with robotic legs, working with electrical stimulation. Since then, we now have been able to have conversations and build relationships here in Ireland to start to do multiple subject studies. So we've done an initial, a spinal excitability study, which is a small assessment of 20 paralyzed people and 20 able-bodied people with electrical stimulation of the spine. We're now moving on to doing a multi-subject 12-person trial to see what happens when people who are incomplete, which is not totally paralyzed, but incomplete patients, what effect walking in a robot has on those people. And then we're going to move on late this year, early next year, to do a multi-subject trial of electrical stimulation with robots. So we're now, I suppose what the film did in telling the story is to start the conversation. And I think Ireland has become, per head of the population, the country with the most exoskeletons, and that's probably no coincidence. Nathan Kerwin down here in Cork has a robot that people can go and use, can pay a fee and go and work in a standard gym to access that. So I think it opened a conversation and made those conversations easier by having the story out there.
And I was going to come to the exoskeleton next. Like, to the untrained eye, if you see a picture or a video of it, you might just think it's this contraption that the person is strapped into and the exoskeleton does all the work. But that's not the case. It does come from movement on your part, does it?
Well, it's I suppose this is why we've been particularly interested in Exobionics robot, because the robot, and there are a number of more and more robots emerging all the time, but Exobionics, one's from San Francisco. When you walk in it, and if you can't do anything at all, it will power you along with motors at the knees and hips, 100%. But if you can do anything at all, it dynamically does less as you do more.
Okay.
And this is where the second component, a separate intervention, which is electrical stimulation of the spinal cord, adding that in allows the nerve, it's kind of like supercharges the nervous system. So now when I walk in the robot, with the effect of the electrical stimulation, allows me to engage voluntarily engage my muscles, and I can do more, and the robot dynamically does less. And that's really important and right at the center of any training principle, that you have to be allowed to do more. So as I do more, the robot will do less. My doing more might only be more 1%, 2%, 3%, but that has to allow for the training effect. And Jamie has experience of all sorts of interventions in England and in Miami. And I think you've had the spinal stimulation, have you?
Yeah, I had the spinal excitability trial anyway with Neil and the guys in Trinity. Yeah.
So I have this is kind of, without getting too technical, but I have been able to voluntarily move my legs, as I say, and the robot does less. I have an injury mid back and lower back, and the electrical stimulation works in the area on the lower back. So I'm pretty sure that, in fact, I know that your results, Jamie, are way better, and the stimulation works way better on a candidate like Jamie as opposed to me. So what we really look forward to is whenever Jamie and others get up in the robot with the electrical stimulation, acting on their back, and see what they can do from a voluntary perspective. The other interesting thing is that neck patients in the States are starting to be able to grasp, clean their own teeth, feed themselves using this electrical stimulation. Now, the great thing is we have a direct access with the lead scientist in the world to bring that back here to Ireland, and that has been facilitated by the thousands of runners who have been out here pounding the streets in Cork for the last 6 or 7 years.
And you mentioned how you're hoping to fast track the cure, but the fast track is 15 or 20 years away. How difficult is it to kind of stay patient, and someday you might have a bit of good news, and you kind of have to temper that and say it's not going to improve the same amount every day, that it is one step and then maybe 6 months of nothing and then another step. How important is it to not get carried away with any bits of good news?
Yeah, well, I think both of us will have a perspective on this. I think I probably live my life in a sort of low grade rage every day, and then I just have spikes of where it bubbles over because it's not moving quick enough. Because what we're really talking about is trying to do something that has never been done before. A cure for paralysis has proven to be impossible to discover up to this point in history. Yet here we are talking about finding a cure for paralysis, and that's in exploration territory. So, history is filled with accounts of the impossible made possible through human endeavour by people pioneering things that have never been done before. And I'm prepared to hang my hat on that. I think, Jamie, you're prepared to hang your hat on that. But that's pretty difficult because you want that to happen now. And it's not happening. It's happening, but it's not happening quick enough. So I don't know. Are you in a constant rager, Jamie?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I think at times, yeah. I think there's certainly a different. You're certainly just a small bit, like you said. I think that word there, like it was a good word, tempered. Like you just try to temper that. You try to say, look, but by the same token, look. To be honest, I've tried to say, you know what, if something good and unexpected comes, just embrace it and take it, because you're only going to get 2 or 3 days out of it anyway. Take the 2 or 3 days and have a party and, like sing and dance for 2 or 3 days, because you might go back into that constant low rage for the next 3 weeks. So you may as well enjoy that 2 or 3 days when, you make a breakthrough, or whether it, and I suppose over the last 3 years it's been different things, whether it's something as simple as when you're on a full-time catheter in a hospital and managing to get off that. For some people that never happens, for some people it does happen. Just taking your own small moves towards your own level of happiness, whether it's a move towards a cure or not. Like, but taking, you know, when you kind of not even eliminate one small problem, but move towards fixing one small problem of the multitude that you have, just enjoying it, like, and just taking it for what it is. I mean, for me, like, it's ironic I'm talking here about how much I'd love to be out of the wheelchair, but for me, one of the best days in hospital was when I actually finally got into a wheelchair, because I spent the first 3 or 4 days, first week or two, inside in a bed. So, you know, it's something that I kind of have to try and remind myself every so often, is how happy I was to actually just get in, to be able to get out of my bed day one, and kind of say, look, yeah, you want out of the wheelchair, but by the same token, you know, it's also allowed you to do a lot of things that, you know, maybe 40 years ago wouldn't have happened, or 50 years ago wouldn't have happened. So, like you said, it's that word tempering it, like, you know, and it's kind of saying, you know, I think one of the very good things, speaking to somebody in the NRH, had to say to me very early on was, I think your only reference point can only ever be yourself. You know, you can't. I think it's futile enough looking at somebody who's in a lot worse position than you and trying to say, oh, well, at least my lot isn't as bad as his or hers, because that'll do you for about 10 or 15 seconds, and then you look back to yourself and say, do you know what, no, this isn't perfect. But by the same token, you have to look at where you were, and obviously for me, I always look at where I was before this, and I look at, you know, playing for the club and playing for Cork underage and intermediate, and, you know, and knocking around senior panels, that kind of stuff. And I'll always look at that and say, that's up here, and where I am now is for me personally is down here. But then I also need to, you know, if you're going to take that viewpoint, you also need to look back at the 2 weeks you spent in the hospital and how happy you were to get out, you know, and go for a meal in the local, in, I think it's the Beaumont Inn or something, where I was, you know, near me, like, where just for a chicken curry or something. You know, you have to be able to look and say, well, you've also come from a point where you couldn't get out of bed to, you know, now you're going out, you're managing a hurling team, you're getting involved in these things. So I suppose it's all relative, you know, and the only thing it can ever be relative to is yourself, I think, you know.
Yeah, well, and as well, if it hadn't happened, you wouldn't be a Fitzgibbon Cup winning manager. You know, you've gone into this because, I think you said to me previously, like, it was the next best thing when you couldn't play, and is it a kind of a release for you, you know, to focus on that, to not always be kind of, you know, thinking about,
yeah, big time. Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's kind of like you said, it's that release, but it's just almost, I think more than anything, it's being engaged in something. I think that for me is the big thing. And you know, and I suppose that's the kind of point, like, I mean, for some guys, they can go back to their work and they've got their family life, and, you know, and they're engaged, and they can be happy. And I think, you know, that there's absolutely nothing in the wide earthly world remotely wrong with that. And whatever their situation is, you know, once they're happy with themselves, and once you're happy, you know, that is the most important thing. And if you're happy, you're engaged, you know, you've gotten back to work, you've done these things, you know, that you're doing the things that drive you, then great. You know, for me, sport is always one of the things that drive me. So to be engaged in sport again, and, you know, affecting it, for me is huge, like, you know. But also, you know, for me, it's something that I don't want to be doing something I'm not engaged in, you know. And I'm looking around at the moment, and there's probably 2 things that right now grab my focus and say, I want to be engaged in that. One of them is being involved in my sports, which is hurling and football, and actually being actively involved in them. And the other is to be actively involved in the physical side of this, you know, to be putting myself forward for things with Mark, you know, because right now, as a 25-year-old, you know, unmarried, no kids, any of that, you know, for want of a better word, no major responsibilities. My only responsibility is to me, like, and for me right now, what I still want to do is I want to get involved in these things. I want to, you know, commit 12 months or 2 years of my life to a trial like this, something like that, you know. And I'm sure, Mark, like, you're saying the same thing. You're saying when you're engaged, that makes it that bit easier, you know, to do these things, like. Absolutely. And, you know, it's about being engaged. Whatever engages you, if what engages you is getting back to doing the job that you were doing before your accident, or before your illness, or before whatever has hit you, if that for you is what being engaged is, then you do that. If for you being engaged is trying to actively search for a cure, fast track a cure for paralysis, then that's what you need to engage yourself in. And I think for me, that's, that's the key point. Like it's that word, to be engaged.
And just if I can stick with the hurling for a second, you said after the Fitzgibbon Cup final win over Carlow, DJ Carey complimented your coaching, and that you were glad that it was just that rather than, you were seen as a coach rather than a coach who's in a wheelchair. How important is it that, that's people's view? Or
Yeah, it is very important. Like, I mean, look, one of the things I said, I did a coaching conference in Croke Park last January, like, and I think for me, one of the first things I said, look, I am going to deal with this because, like, I am sitting here in front of you in a chair. None of you like are stupid. Like, I'm 25. If right was right, I'd be doing my best to try and make county squads and play hurling. Like, I'm not to say that I would, but I'd be doing my best to that end. So there is, like, I don't want it to be this elephant in the room that, you can't say he's in a wheelchair. Like, I am, like, it's kind of no more than I always say, I like to cut through the bullshit and say the whole thing about there's nothing you can't do. There is things you can't do. Also, let's cut through it and say, look, this is the situation, acknowledge it, which is my word, like, acknowledge it. Now, go on, you're a coach. Because if you're a crap coach, you're a crap coach on your feet, you're a crap coach in a wheelchair. If you're a good coach, you're a good coach on your feet and you're a good coach in a wheelchair. I've no idea as of yet. And, like I said, I like that DJ said that and just stuck to saying that it was nice that he said, he's a good coach. And for me, but, like, I've no idea after 12 months whether I'm a good coach, a bad coach, a medium coach. Like, the odds are somewhere in the middle, like, and you'll try and get better as time goes on. Like, but it is important for me, to just be defined by what I'm doing, not by, the situation I have. But by the same token, like, I have no major problem with somebody saying, like, this is the situation you're in, because it is the situation I'm in. Once we can move on and say that, that's just a fact, but it's not relevant to the discussion then that we're having, like, but it is a fact. So, like, I mean, I suppose for me, like, I did like that kind of moving on from that whole narrative of inspiration, we'll say, it's just a word that doesn't sit too easily with me. Like, I prefer, just that, what, he's a decent coach. Like, he's a good bit to learn and he might get better as it goes on. He might not, though. Like, this could be the pinnacle of it. So, it's just that kind of, I do appreciate that. And for me, it is important to be seen as just a coach, but by the same token, like, I'm not naive enough to think, and I don't think anyone's naive enough to think that it's not there, that people can't see it, like, that is just, it's just a fact of life, and it's just something that you need to acknowledge and then move on from, for me.
And Mark, Jamie, as he was saying, has the hurling and football to focus on, and as well as working on helping to find a cure. You have a lot of experience in kind of extreme pursuits and adventures. Have you anything on the back burner at the moment?
Well, I got a bike. I got a hand bike last year. Well, if I go back, you see, after my accident, I built my whole career on doing adventure races. And a year before my accident, I did a race to the South Pole. So I had this business, motivational speaking to companies, and then that would help me pay for the adventures, and the adventures would get bigger and bigger, and then I'd get more and more talks. So when I was lying in hospital, I thought, well, God, I've already reinvented myself after being blind, after going blind. I wanted to go to London and start an investment bank. Then I went blind. I kind of had to change direction, became a blind adventure motivational speaker, and I'm lying in hospital paralyzed thinking, God, you can't be a blind paralyzed adventure guy. And not only that, you can't be a motivational speaker if your story is life was good, went blind, disaster, then it was good again, then I fell out a window and it's another disaster. It's not exactly very motivational, right? So I suppose I went and I thought I'd be an adventurer. I went to Norway and I did I was preparing to do a hand bike race, but we went up there and we were camping. I was in a hand bike and the lads were on skis, and I was just a total passenger. I was slowing them down. I just thought, this is just not what I was there to compete in adventure races. I never did an expedition. I was there competing, and it just didn't work for me being a passenger. I was sort of like a novelty person. So I then switched, and I suppose my sport is walking in my robot and the electrical stimulation and going to the gym every day. This is the thing that I now treat as my sport. But have also added in hand biking, and I've got a tandem hand bike, arms on the back, and then legs on the front, and the guy steering. So I'm doing these sportives, but I'm not, unlike you, Jamie, 25. You see, I'm now 41, so I can now move into this sort of non-compete category of fellas who just go down, do a race, and then go to the boozer afterwards. You see, so the hand bikes, the sportives, which the contraption I'm on, no one else has one, so I can't compete.
Okay, so you're the best.
Also means you're the best.
Yeah.
Yeah. First or last in a one-man category.
Unbeaten. And so, will you both be taking part in these trials?
Well, I'll not be, because I've already been doing it, and I'm kind of a
Overseen?
spoilt goods, if you like. So the trials will be, and this is kind of where the nature of science will dictate who's involved and who's not involved. There's an ethics committee. There are inclusion and exclusion criteria. People will be there'll be an announcement made, and people will put themselves forward, and relevant candidates within the age range, within the injury range, within the range which will allow people to commit to the trials over the period, the number of sessions over the particular period of time. Candidates will come forward, and I'm quite sure Jamie will put himself forward, and then the scientists will review all of the applications, and people will get in or out. But and that process will carry on. But the agenda is to do these trials simply to make sure that we can get the devices commercialized, and people who are not in the trials can access the technology in the community. So I'm sure. Well, I know Jamie's going to be putting himself forward, but neither Jamie nor I can say if the scientists will include or exclude.
Okay.
And
just to finish up, we come back to the run in the dark. How many people are you expecting to take part in it this year?
3,000 in Cork, 3,000 in Belfast, and 9,000 in Dublin. But we got 2,500 in London, hopefully 3,000 in Manchester, and then we got these smaller events, 50 cities around the world. So 25,000 people will hopefully be involved. But we've always got this. Belfast and Cork, you see, seem to have this, are just about the same every year, and we build up. But what we've noticed is we had an early bird registration where you got a free T-shirt if you signed up before the end of August, and I noticed obviously people in Cork we're tight in the north. You say the stereotype of us being tight, we love a deal. So all the northerners are signing up like mad in the north to get their free T-shirt, you see, because they're tighter than the people down here in Cork. So Belfast slightly ahead of Cork at the moment. So we want to make sure that Cork catch up and sign up to the 3,000 limit. But we've got a couple of months to go. It's on the 15th of November, and people can sign up at runinthedark.org.
And where will you both be taking part?
I'm not sure yet. Depends on training. I'm up in Limerick. I think the Cork event's a different day this year, doesn't it? So I might be. Or which event's a different day?
Dublin's the day before, because we weren't allowed to have it on the 15th in Dublin because Depeche Mode are playing in the 3, much to our annoyance. So we could have run over a few aging rockers with 9,000 people running them over. So Dublin's on the 14th of November. Cork, Limerick, Mallow, Castlebar, Donegal, Athlone, Belfast, and all the other ones around the world are on Wednesday the 15th of November.
I must check the higher education leagues leagues committee fixtures, find out what city in Ireland I'll be in. I think we have a league game that day, but I'm not sure where it is. It could be Cork or Limerick, so I'll be in one. If I'll be in Cork or Limerick, I'd say more than likely.
And you'll be joined by a multitude of others, and the fight will keep going on.
Yeah, we were you talking to Jamie about his fixture list there, or the
I was talking about the bigger picture.
Yeah. Look, the fight will go on, and the fight will go on because we have we have this community of people right around the world now helping us to fund what we're doing. But what we're moving towards now is setting up a research centre, and when we get to that point, if we can support the scientists to do their science, we can access funds at the government level in the US and the European level to really amplify what we're doing, to increase the scale of what we're doing. But it all starts with this kind of social enterprise, which is nominally a not-for-profit business, but of course that's a ridiculous thing to say because it's entirely for profit.
No such thing in the world, Mark.
Profit is the only reason for doing this thing, which is what we do to channel it back into the research.
But as well as an actual financial profit, there'll hopefully be a social profit at the end of it all.
Oh, 100%, because those profits go directly into the research. The research is what gets the data to commercialize the devices, and the devices means that people, once we commercialize them, I say we, all of the people around the world who are trying to move research from research into companies and into the clinic, once we help them to do that, it means that you don't have to be on a research study to access it. You can access it in your community. So we want to help the scientists, let the scientists do their science, and then help them get it out of their labs into the clinic.
Okay, that's great, guys. Thanks very much, and best of luck with it all.